And so the Nima's journey to here today is that the last 7 weeks, we have run 69 engagement sessions across the 10 countries with over 200 introductions to policymakers and procurers, innovators and investors across the regional ecosystems. So if you're running a business and you have 200 people that have been lined up for you, that is a phenomenal business development opportunity. Yeah. So where from here?
Where from here is that we have, how many people did you say? A couple hundred people to follow up with. Well, that's really what it is, right? It's about taking advantage of the access that we've now been given. We've met some fantastic people, and we've scoped out the landscape through some Q&As and things, and now we have a bunch of really strong, warm leads where we can reach out to them and figure out what are the next steps in each context.
So in this sense, the companies are a glue. They're a glue going through a program, but it's also an opportunity for governments to speak to the other departments who are working in the same field. So how is Denmark tackling the issue of food waste? How does that compare with what's happening in Brazil? How does that compare with decarbonization in Spain, with what's going on in Scotland? So the policymaker opportunity here of growing those connections is vastly augmented. But Jan, we've been in a partnership with a Technical University of Denmark for the past 18 months, and we were very fortunate that, as well as being part of the CivTech Alliance, you also suggested and offered that you would evaluate this, given its complete experimentation as a sort of 10-country PRAN intergovernmental collaboration. So tell us about it from your perspective.
Yeah, so we are from, of course, the technical side, and have been working quite some time in trying to figure out exactly what role tech has in this, not just as a mean to produce and develop something, but also as a mean to help the whole process. And I think that has been an important part. So I don't know if I can take this. So what I want to do is give sort of an insight in some of the key findings. So as you said, we have been on a 7-week program that's ended last week. So we have a lot of data from that, a lot of interviews from the program partners and the companies involved, and also a little bit from the academics, which are not so pronounced in the whole travel of this. So can I do? Yeah, I can do. So just a little bit about the technology. So I'm the tech guy, so I need to do a little bit of this. So the reason we can do all these amazing things is because we got very far from the point of where we developed the first transistor that is the foundation of all the computing that we are doing, rapidly growing in the amount of components you can put together. That means the speed you can do data with, the amount of data you can work with is increasing extremely. This is doing an exponential increasement, and that's what we are seeing. So why is this important? So if you take the next one, so digital definitely come with a speed of what you can do and the size of it. And of course we want to use the digital to make solutions. And that is one part of it, but there's another very interesting part that also come into all the sustainable and green and so on. That is, digital also enables a lot of the other sciences in order to create a convergence. So both from the social sciences, the life sciences, and the physical sciences, which are the general sciences that we're looking at, they tap into the digital, and digital help accelerating those. So we start seeing combinations of these domains, and that creates a huge amount of potential. And that will be also tapping into addressing these global challenges. So if you go one further, when we have all of this acceleration, this amount of data, the knowledge of things, it changes the way that we think, the way that we work, the way that we learn, going from a very industrialized way where we are sort of like being in silos, there's concrete plans, you go for the money, you're controlling everything, into a more digital part where things are looking, just put again, much more different. So instead of private and closed, it becomes open and transparent. It's not any more hierarchies and silos. It goes into networks you want to build up. You don't plan, you experiment, because you cannot plan at the speed of what's going on. And so these are the two extremes, and this is the kind of things that are hitting us, as whether we are in academia or in industry or in government. Now, if you go one further, so the way I see this creating a shared program and why it is so important is that if you look at it, you can click one more. Then it has been gathering these GovTech, CivTech programs, as Alexander has already said, around the globe. And in those, of course, you have both the governmental parts that are dragging into and linking together with the businesses. So, and from our point of view as an academia, we are interested in looking at what is our role in this. How can we help facilitate what's going on? So, and one of the things that clearly is that we can of course look at it as a scientific object and trying to understand what's going on and learn from this. This is what we have been working on over these 7 weeks and will do further on. So we will make a report on all the findings. We are on our way, but we are far from completed with all the data. But I think what is important is that just like we managed to get all the sciences together by having a common language that no matter whether you are in life science or digital, you can actually work together and you can talk together. And that's in the sciences through the math. But our hope is that we can help making a common language for this process going on. So making all these stakeholders from governments, companies and academia to have a common language where we can talk about these problems. So in the findings that we have so far, there are, I put up here a few quotes when we asked the program partners in the program, so why are they into this? Why are they trying to drive this? And why? So one thing is that they do it in their own country, but also being part of doing it across all the different countries. And some of the quotes up here is quite clear. So it's something new. It's interesting. It's making as we go. So not having a straight plan or anything. It's a very experimental thing, which is of course extremely interesting. It's also about prove to other organizations that it can actually make an impact to do organized collective, and using this to deliver high-profiled programs. And I think this is also what you have seen. I mean, just like not just seeing one of them, but seeing all of them, and it's kind of the same, but then different. And you experience the culture, I think, in a very, very in a very nice manner, seeing some of the same things told in very different ways, and you start understanding what is the core issues in the different programs. And also one of the things that came up is that what is so important with this experiment is that it's actually creating something concrete. It's not about talking or visions or so on, and we should do, and it's actually go do. And showing that it's possible to do. And this goes across, let's say, all the partners, which is kind of interesting, no matter which country you are from. So I don't know if you have any comments into
I think
this before.
The whole notion of being experimental in government, governments aren't by their nature experimental, but you need to be in order to push boundaries and in order to push the way things work. So because the nature of these programs, we were all involved in innovation, we weren't so fazed by the fact that we were making it up as we were going along, because we knew what the end goal was to provide a platform for amazing companies like Blue Lobster to get in front of people they would never otherwise get in front of. So if that's the aim and the vision, to accelerate the product rollout, then how do you then make that happen? And of course, you don't know who's going to come through the door. You're tailoring stuff as it goes along. What happens in week 1 and how you run week 1 is different to how you run week 7. So it's very agile in its thinking. But that means that you're able to seize opportunities and create those opportunities for companies. And that's the key thing about the competencies involved. You know, what does it take for these things to happen in order to give the likes of Blue Lobster and Nima those opportunities. So Jan.
So, yeah, so this is, let's say, one of the other findings in actually trying to look through what people in these programs have said about their skill set, what was needed for them to drive this. And out of this, we have extracted these 8, let's say, overall mindsets that are covering different things. And we will dig deeper into this. I think some of them are quite obvious somehow, but it's nice to see that it's actually coming out of the communication with those program partners. So if you take one step later, then I'll just tap into 2 of them and show some minor things that we already have. So if you go one to the next one, then in one of the questionnaires, it's sort of like what do you need to know about digital technologies? So that's, and maybe it's not surprising that for the GovTech people that are working as said, we don't need to know it in detail, but it is important to know about it and to know enough about it that you actually understand what's going on, and not the least being understand what the effect of some solutions are. And for this, you actually need to learn something about the technologies. You cannot just guess about it. And I think this is one of our roles in these things that we have been working with, building some competencies programs also for ministries and government institutions to make sure that our those stakeholders actually have a language that they can talk with companies and academia, and that we are able to understand each other and become more secured in that as a government person, I can tap in and talk with a professor or with a director of a company like this, and start having a discussion also about the technologies. If you go one more, then we also had a question about what it takes to drive this GSUP forward, because...
And if I just can come in on this bit.
Sure.
So we talk about skill sets and about how you train public servants up. But there's no point in training people up unless they have the right mindset. So you can give people the skills, but unless you give them the right mindset, then you're not going to actually create that transformation. And if they don't have the right heart set, then when things get really tough, they're not going to be able to dig in and see through. And so that's why we talk about mindset and skill set and heart set, because actually transformation is really difficult. For us to open up government to entrepreneurs is really difficult to actually make it work. And so these are the sort of qualities we need when we're dealing with folks. You need that passion and heart set to actually make this stuff and drive it. And that's why this is a unique program, because of the types of people involved in this. Not just passionate entrepreneurs, but also the folks that were behind the scenes, the catalyzers and facilitators to make this happen. So tell us more about this.
Yeah, so it's exactly showing what you said. So, so as you said, I mean, a lot of the transformation is about doing, so that's the skill set. But that is definitely not enough. And for all these program partners, it came out very clear that no, it's not enough. It's very, very important to have the right mindset, but also the heart set, as you said. Because I guess they have all experienced the hard time of actually getting things to work the way that you want. And I have a few quotes on this, because it's interesting to try to dig into what does it mean, a hard set. The one is that, I mean, when it, as you said, when it becomes difficult, and well, that is where you really need it, because you need to be passionate about it and actually overcoming all the hurdles. Another nice quote here was that they actually give the shit. So it means that you are into it, you mean it. It's not just for the show, it's actually important this year. And then it's also important for personal motivation, driving a change and so on. And I think in that sense, these GovTech programs looks a little bit like the X labs of companies that try to put a innovation driven part of your company outside the company to get it to run. And
Exactly.
I think we are seeing this in these. So, coming back to this, and or maybe we should stay a little bit in the other setting about the skills and the GovTechs and so on, because I think one thing is that running the safari and defining it, and it was a bit experiment, but there is a long way from starting as one CivTech unit and figuring out that maybe this is a good idea, and actually getting all the rest to buy in on this. So maybe you can say a little bit about that journey.
So CivTech Scotland was set up in 2015, and it's taken to the point of 5, and it's now in its 6th season, to again now start really gaining massive traction from the perspective of having some real strong case studies of helping companies. And so it takes time for this to build up. So when you start then bringing that at a global level, it's how can you accelerate that that opportunity for collaboration and the platform for growth. And shortly we'll have a very special speaker to help talk a little bit more about that, the support that can be given. So it's those journeys. These things take time to make these things happen. But now we've got the blueprint. It's about how you accelerate that.
Do you have any things to add to this?
Yeah, no, I think it just makes a lot of sense, right? I think we talk about that. We talk about it when we're recruiting people into the startup scene about what we need. Of course, skills are nice, but it's the perseverance that at the end of the day you need in order to create real big change, right? And it's no small feat to create innovation within the public sector. You kind of are in charge of a whole population that have entrusted you with a lot of responsibility, and I can see why. We have a lot of fail fast mentality in the startup scene, so you try things and they fail. But I understand that that's a lot more difficult when you're working in the public sector, because if you fail a bunch of times, that's, first of all, people who haven't necessarily signed up for it being tested upon, or it's their tax-paying money. So it's a lot more difficult. It has to be more robust. So to go through something like that, skills, I think you learn the skills that you need on the way there, right? But if you got the mindset, you got the heart for it, that's what's going to carry you through and actually want to push those dreams through the system that we obviously need, and I'm being spoken about all over COP this week, right? So
and I guess the heart set also contains some persistency.
Yeah, exactly.
So to really, because and I think this is interesting, because in research that is also what is required. It takes a long time, and you have to fight a lot, and you have to fail a lot. So it looks a little bit alike. But what I think is interesting is if you look at the young generation, which are sort of like this swap generation. So you're not, you don't stay, you just swip around. Yeah. But still manage to actually, when it comes to it, and I guess this is where the heart comes in, that you get persistent on something you're passionate about.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But tell us a bit more about Blue Lobster in terms of how they're engaging with fishermen, how they are transforming that whole sustainability piece. And you talk about kind of getting fresher fish and paying people a fairer wage.
Right.
That must have come from somewhere.
Yeah, so I mean, it did. First it started off with kind of a lack of access to fresh fish, but we went down and started speaking to the fishermen, and we found out that they weren't getting a lot of money for their fish because they had to go through a very, very long logistics system. They had on average 4 to 5 middlemen between the fishermen and the final consumer, and that whole value chain was actually eating up all of the price that the fishermen could have gotten. So what we realized is that we could, through technology and the beauty that you were speaking about before from the first transistor, through this network that technology can make, we could actually cut away on average 5 middlemen from the logistics chain by connecting the fishermen directly with the final consumer. And there we realized we actually had the ability to kind of mess with the market a little bit. We could create an economic incentive for some fishermen to work with us. And that's when we decided to look at the sustainability angle and take that responsibility on us, because well, we're passionate young people and we've got the heart with us and all that. So we decided to only work with sustainable fishermen, and our mission then became to create an economic incentive in the market for fishermen to use sustainable methods. And that was kind of the base of how we started. The public sector stuff came afterwards, where we could just see that fishing is a heavily regulated industry, because fish is just completely different than all other foods, right? It's, you go into nature, you grab a bunch of like wild animals, and then we take them home on an industrial scale and eat them. It would be like, imagine if we're all waiting for all the birds to fly south once a year, and then we all stood outside and like shot them all down from the sky. If that's what we're doing with fish every day, right? And we're creating an industry around it. So of course, the government has to be involved here, because we need to make sure that we're maintaining the populations at a healthy level. And that's not something we started looking at, overfishing and making sure that the data quality was right. And we're like, this is too mammoth of a task for a small startup, as great as we think we are. We need to work together with the public sector. And we think we can. I think we can make something better. And if you look at the requirements, if you look at the government, the fishing ministry needs to know what is being caught. And they have an interface for that. But who has the incentive to create something that's super easy for fishermen to use? We're basically trying to create like a one-click solution where he gets all his needs met in one place. So the public sector was a completely natural partner for us to get in with, but actually it took some convincing to get them on board with it, even after we had the fishermen.
And so how much did you have to go externally to then come back in?
Yeah.
Get that validation.
So, we actually built the first model and started doing it, and then we were still talking to the fishing ministry, being like, guys, we really want to work with you rather than just building on top of your technology. If we could somehow build together, that would be probably better on all parameters, and we could understand what your problems are, and I think we could solve some of them too. But yeah, and then they were like, yeah, great, but we need validation that people would actually use it. We're like, okay, whatever. Give us a moment. So we go out into the industry, we collect some nice testimonials, some nice statements, we slap some numbers on the amount of people already using the prototype that we built. But you're right, we kind of had to go out, and the proof of, the burden of proof was on us, right? We had to go out into the market, show there was a demand, and then bring it back to the government. But now we know how to do that.
And so now, in terms of kind of the scale-up program, where you've done it from the Danish government, you're now then seeing, right, here are the opportunities. Like, how's it done in Scotland? How's it done in Brazil? How's it done in the States? Yeah. And opening up those markets.
Yeah, and that was what was so great about this program, was that we had more or less access to the same type of people, but they were saying really different things, right? And the way that their systems work were really, really different. But as someone who likes to innovate and think creatively, that was the funnest task ever. It was like hearing someone say, we have a lot of small fishermen, so they don't all have smartphones, so there's something there. You're like, okay, cool, that's an issue, and you just go into problem solving mode. And someone else is like, actually, we only have 5 harbors in our entire country, and their vessels are on average 5 times bigger than the ones in Denmark. You're like, great, new challenge, let's figure out how to do that, right? But the base technology is the same. What you're working is how to contextualize it to the local market. And it's so great having the knowledge from the public sector and the civil servants that we can work with there, helping us find out how do we make it fit there? How is it an easy adaptation into a new market?
And I think that's where it's about, in terms of engagement with the public sector, it's moving away from value extraction to one of value creation. So how do you build partnerships with companies that have amazing technologies that meet both kind of citizen consumer goals, but also your own policy objectives? And that's the whole premise behind this, is that you give the companies like Blue Lobster a platform, and from there, you start ticking off all the boxes and value adds as you go through. So, it's these opportunities that we create. But Jan, what else did you find in your in the findings, particularly from the companies? Yeah,
so that's on the next slide, but I just want to take this one. Because, so I think when we look at it, we have had a tradition of having bilateral collaborations between these different stakeholders. Maybe not so much between the academia and the GovTech, which is at least not from a tech point of view, which is probably understanding. Well, But I think we are now building up this relation in order to help, and this is about understanding the technology and then trying to create this level where all stakeholders can take part in a discussion on how we are going to to solve the problems of our society going forward. I think we have in the later years as academia made a transformation from being those who are just providing the technology and people can go and use them for whatever, to actually have more responsibility in what it is we develop and why we developed and how we can help it to be used in the right way, and then getting into such a dialogue. So our normal transition would be to the companies where it's like tech trends, so new developments, how do you accelerate the uptake into industry? But I think we have, where I have the question mark, a role to play, and this is the one that we are working on at the moment, also using this scale-up program to get a better understanding of these things. And in our place, we call it Tech for Civ, just to turn it around, because we think that tech comes first. You need to understand a basic level of it before you can actually go and apply it and so on. So it's just push. So a few more quotes from these questionnaires, from the program partners, tapping into, let's say, the role of the CivTech or GovTech programs and how they see themselves. And one of them here is like, and if you want to really address these large problems, then this is a very nice way to create a sort of internationalism across these different programs, because I think many of them are doing it in their own countries and doing well, but just getting this extra dimension on it is kind of a big learning. I mean, you say how much you get out of it. I've never dreamed about it. and I think the same goes for us in this sense. Yeah. I mean, it's sort of like an idea and then turns out to work. And also having this one, again, as I said up here, the opportunity to do things differently, that you will do it as an agency. This is again a little bit about this, creating a special space for innovation. And I think it's really interesting that the governments are talking about this into this, because then you have something where I think it really will succeed. Yeah. Now looking back at the, I don't know if you have...
Well, it leaves us on the point about innovation diplomacy and the ability of using innovation as a way of building government relations. So not just at the policy level, but actually at organizational level. And where you understand actually how you deliver stuff, how you make this stuff happen. And that's the hard bit. Yeah. But that's how you then build up these relations, because it's relations not just at kind of ministerial level, but at official level and at company level, and then engaging with consumers. So at all parts of society, and that's why this is a four-dimensional program, bringing all those parts together.
So what about, so you say you do it not at the ministerial level, but at one level down. So how do you make sure you actually get the ministries involved in that, and then the understanding what you're doing is something they should support?
Absolutely, and I think, I wonder whether at this point one might bring in a very special guest, and so I'd be delighted to welcome up our Cabinet Secretary for Finance and Economy, Kate Forbes. Hello. Yes, do come up. Here's hello.
Well, it's been so interesting listening to the discussion about how you get ministers involved. And I'm an example of one of those big bad ministers in the Scottish Government. And I think there's so many points that have been made that I'd love to come back on. Because from my perspective, if I piece together the different elements of what I've heard just now, I represent a constituency in Scotland. Both coasts, got East Coast and West Coast. Both coastlines have a lot of fishermen that are very frustrated about the way the world works.
Right.
And here I am in government, wondering how on earth to make life easier for the fishermen. And don't report this. Hopefully nobody's listening that might be reporting for a newspaper. But I don't have the answers. And that's the beauty, I think, of CivTech and of these forms of collaboration, where we have more policy challenges than we care to count. And we don't have the solutions. Right. But I know the solutions are out there. And from my perspective, it's how do you create the environment where the solutions come to the fore and then the money follows it? Because my responsibilities are, yes, economic, so finding policy solutions for the fishermen, but they're also financial. My job is to ensure we have enough money to do everything in Scotland that we want to do. And I would far rather spend more money on effective solutions than less money on ineffective solutions. But I think, there's just 3 quick points I wanted to make about all of this. The first is how you create that environment where you can have those conversations. Because Jan, you talked about or perhaps it was you, Alexander, talked about the willingness to fail. Governments don't like failing. I mean, we're at a huge climate summit where nobody wants to fail. Governments don't want to fail. But sometimes getting to the right solution requires an element of failure along the way. So there does need to be a risk appetite for failure, which does not sit comfortably with us, does not sit comfortably with taxpayers' money, does not sit comfortably with our electoral cycle. So I think there needs to be an environment where we're willing to embrace failure on the road to success. And then secondly, you talked about the fact that you need to understand tech and that it should be tech for Civ. I agree, because that's the tool, isn't it? And too often, and we've seen it I think a lot in the last few years actually, where you see politicians scrutinizing tech companies, and it's really quite mortifying because it reveals how little policymakers, decision makers understand technology. And so we need the experts to start and for us to work with you. So it needs to start with the tech and with the tools. So that was my first point, just about creating the environment to make all of this work. And there's a whole host of other things that I could say. But my second point, and I will be relatively brief to see if anybody wants to come in, is the willingness to share ideas. So I imagine that the fishermen in Denmark don't perhaps have the same problem as the fishermen in Scotland.
Right.
But I don't know. But who knows? Perhaps there's somebody in, I was going to say France, but that might not be overly appropriate right now in talking about fishermen. When different countries are facing the same challenges.
Yeah.
So why keep reinventing the wheel?
Right.
And this, what CivTech have managed to do over the last 8 months is tremendous. Being able to work across 10 different countries with different challenges, but to ensure that we get solutions and that we get those relationships with policymakers and businesses and entrepreneurs right. So that willingness to share best practice across the country. And then the third point is just how fast-paced an environment it is. That by the time we've passed legislation, you have reinvented your business 10 times. Yeah. And by the time that we've gone through the normal forms of scrutiny, someone else has invented a new solution. So how we adopt democratic processes to keep up with the level of innovation is a really pressing question, I think, if you believe in democracy and if you believe in taking the public with you. So those are going to be my 3 observations on why I think this is so important, and why there's an imperative for us to reshape the way that we engage, but also to remember that sometimes things happen slowly and bureaucratically for a reason. So how do we maintain that level of democratic engagement at the same time finding the solutions to the problems that real people face right now?
But and thank you so much, Cabinet Secretary, but it's only with, these government programs can only work if you have ministerial support. And we've been extremely lucky that someone like yourself has supported us for the last 3 years. You've got it. You've recognised the potential this has, and then it's about how do you do more of this? And that's why my successor at the CivTech program managed to write the business case that has secured nearly 60 million of funding for the next 5 years, and that shows amazing commitment to these government innovation programs and a real model for governments. And in that sense, CivTech is a model for governments around the world, because a lot of the people participating in the program from the other countries have identical programs modeled on how CivTech Scotland has worked. But it takes, absolute buy-in from ministers to then push sometimes some of the slower bureaucrats and officials to say, no, this is important, this is worth it. So, you talk about the environments actually within government, it's the ministers that then sign it off, and that's where, certainly for us, we've always been delighted with the support that you've given us, because because it makes stuff happen, and it's a precedent.
And I have a comment to what you said about the technology being important, and of course it's important, but it's more than a tool, and I think that's one of the challenges. It comes with a mindset, and we have the responsibility to provide that mindset as well, because if you don't know how you can use it and shouldn't use it, it may not work as it should. The other thing about being afraid of failing, which I think is a problem, and we hear that the startups, they fail fast and so on. As a scientist, we fail all the time. It's really a lot of failures and a few successes. And some of the successes is actually a failure turned into a success, because you by accident find something you didn't expect.
Yeah.
And I think we have to be aware of not being so afraid of this. But I fully understand in a government setting with taxpayers' money and so on, this is really very, very difficult. But I think we have to figure out how to deal with this. And then I think, as I also said before, I think it's extremely important that we talk together, all of us. So it's not one or the other and so on. We are in it together. And I think this is extremely important, but we are seeing a world that is getting more and more polarized. Either you are for tech or you are against tech, you are for climate or against climate. That's not solving anything.
Yeah. I mean, a few points there, and we quite like being pioneering in Scotland. So we like the idea that we are pushing the boat out and trying new things. The challenge becomes scaling it up. So finding something that's new and that works, and then how you scale it up so that you don't just have lots of small pockets of success, but actually you see platforms that are successful. And I think that's the next big challenge for Scotland, where CivTech has been hugely successful, in my humble opinion, and we've seen how relatively small sums of money have gone really far because of a mindset, and a mindset that's willing to collaborate. And I think that's worth its weight in gold. But once you find something that works, it's not just used in a ministerial speech to show what's possible, but actually it becomes the status quo, it becomes the norm. And I think that's where there's still a gap, and that's my responsibility. It's a government's responsibility to take what we see that's working and scale it up, and then celebrate it as well.
Brilliant. Well, Cabinet Secretary, thank you so much. And I know in this environment, questions might be a little tricky, but if not, we know that bang on time. We think that the reception will very shortly start it. So please do stay for a few drinks and nibbles. But certainly, Cabinet Secretary, thank you so much. Nima, thank you. And Jan, great to have those insights and the evaluation. We look forward to hearing from it. And as I understand, it's worthy of being punted up to a few organizations. Right. So we look forward to seeing that as it comes out. But and thank you all for listening in this silent disco environment, which is certainly a new experience. And thanks to our friends at the Nordic Pavilion for hosting this. So, but feel free to come and have a chat with us straight afterwards.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.